History usually portrays conquerors as unbreakable figures of pure will, men who shaped the world through dominance, strategy, and the illusion of total control. But when we look closely at biographies, court chronicles, medical records, and primary sources, a very different story emerges. Behind the myth of the great man were rulers plagued by irrational fears that defied logic and exposed their human fragility. From storms and oceans to animals, weapons, and insects, these phobias were not private quirks, but forces that shaped policy, architecture, and power itself. This is the hidden psychology of conquest, where the most feared leaders in history were often prisoners of their own terror. At number 1, stepping into the thunderclouds of ancient Rome, we meet Augustus Caesar and his crippling fear of lightning. Augustus Caesar, who ruled from 27 before Christ to 14 after Christ, was the founder of the Roman Empire and one of the most powerful administrators in history. He ended the long and bloody Roman civil wars, defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra, and ushered in the Pax Romana, a period of relative peace that lasted for generations. Publicly, he projected the image of calm authority and divine protection, especially as the adopted son of the deified Julius Caesar and as Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome. Yet behind this carefully crafted image, Augustus suffered from astrophobia, an intense fear of lightning and thunder. The origin of this phobia can be traced to a documented traumatic event during the Cantabrian Wars in Spain, as recorded by the historian Suetonius in Lives of the 12 Caesars. While traveling by litter during a night march, a violent storm erupted, and a lightning bolt struck the procession, scorching Augustus's litter and instantly killing a slave walking directly in front of him with a torch. This near-death experience, occurring within arm's reach, left a deep psychological scar. In Roman belief, lightning was the weapon of Jupiter, king of the gods, meaning this event was seen not just as natural, but as divine intervention. Augustus responded with superstition, carrying or wearing sealskin because of the widespread belief that lightning never struck seals. When storms grew violent, he abandoned superstition and physically fled underground, hiding in vaulted cellars until the thunder passed. This fear even shaped Roman architecture, as Augustus dedicated the temple of Jupiter Tonans on the Capitoline Hill, specifically to thank the god for sparing his life, revealing how deeply this bizarre phobia influenced the ruler of the Roman world.
Coming in at number 2, we confront the deep waters that haunted Byzantine Emperor Heraclius. Heraclius, who ruled from 610 to 641 after Christ, was a tragic but formidable figure who saved the Byzantine Empire from collapse by defeating the Sassanid Persians and recovering the true cross. Despite these achievements, his later life was dominated by limnophobia and hydrophobia, an irrational fear of large bodies of water that made travel by sea unbearable. This phobia developed late in his reign, likely triggered by decades of relentless warfare and immense psychological strain. As the Arab conquests stripped the empire of territory, the deeply religious Heraclius may have interpreted these losses as signs of divine punishment, transforming the natural world into something threatening. The sea, once the lifeline of the Byzantine Empire, became a source of terror. This phobia reached its most dramatic expression when Heraclius needed to return to Constantinople after retreating from the Eastern Front. Unable to board a ship or even look at the water of the Bosporus Strait, he forced imperial engineers to build a massive pontoon bridge connecting the Bay of Fidelia to the opposite shore. To prevent panic, the bridge was covered with thick sand to resemble land and lined with high walls of dense foliage to block the view of the sea entirely. Heraclius crossed through this artificial landscape, believing himself on solid ground. Landing at number 3, we uncover the unexpected fear of dogs that followed Genghis Khan across the steppes. Genghis Khan, who ruled from 1206 to 1227, forged the largest contiguous land empire in history, uniting the Mongol tribes and conquering territories from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea.
Known for ruthless efficiency, innovative military tactics, and psychological warfare, he appears fearless in every historical portrayal. Yet sources reveal that Genghis Khan suffered from cynophobia, a fear of dogs. This fear makes sense when placed in the context of 12th century Mongolia, where dogs were not pets but massive Bankar mastiffs bred to guard livestock from wolves and bears. These animals were notoriously aggressive, sometimes kept half-starved to increase ferocity, and capable of attacking armed men on horseback. Evidence for this phobia comes from the secret history of the Mongols, written shortly after Genghis Khan's death. The text recounts how his father, Yesuge, warned a host not to let dogs frighten young Temujin. This detail is significant because it humanizes a figure otherwise portrayed as invincible. The fear persisted into adulthood, with his mother, Hoyalin, reportedly keeping guards instead of dogs near her dwelling to accommodate her son. Even the greatest conqueror of the medieval world carried a childhood terror shaped by the brutal environment of the steppe. At number 4, towering over history both literally and figuratively, stands Peter the Great and his terror of cockroaches. Peter I of Russia, who ruled from 1682 to 1725, was nearly 6 feet 8 inches tall and known for personally laboring in shipyards while forcing Russia into the modern world. Despite his physical dominance and iron will, Peter suffered from kazaraidophobia, an intense fear of cockroaches. This was not a mild discomfort, but a debilitating phobia that controlled his movements and routines. He refused to sleep in any room if he suspected the presence of cockroaches, and required servants to inspect accommodations ahead of his arrival. If insects were found, he would immediately refuse to stay, regardless of diplomatic consequences. One famous incident highlights the severity of this fear. While visiting a wooden countryside house, Peter asked if there were cockroaches and was falsely reassured. When he later saw a cockroach crawling near him or falling from the ceiling, he reacted with violent panic, punching the host and fleeing the house instantly. Finally, at number 5, we separate myth from fact with Napoleon and the misunderstood fear of cats. Napoleon Bonaparte, often rumored to have hated cats, did not actually suffer from ailurophobia. No reliable primary sources from his lifetime support this claim. In fact, his wife, Empress Josephine, kept cats at Malmaison, and Napoleon tolerated them, even if he was not particularly fond of them. The true cat phobia belonged to his nephew, Napoleon III, also known as Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon III, Emperor of the Second French Empire, reportedly experienced severe and irrational fear when near cats, sometimes jumping onto furniture or refusing to enter rooms until the animal was removed. Over time, popular memory merged the two Napoleons, wrongly attributing this bizarre phobia to the more famous conqueror. Correcting this historical error is essential, as it highlights how myths can distort our understanding of powerful figures. In the end, this case reminds us that even history's greatest conquerors were deeply human, shaped not only by ambition and strategy, but also by fear, trauma, and psychological vulnerability. At number 6, stepping into the uneasy courts of early modern Britain, we encounter James I and his paralyzing fear of drawn swords. James I of England, also known as James VI of Scotland, who ruled from 1603 to 1625, was a king marked by intellectual confidence but profound physical fear. His reign unfolded under the shadow of assassination plots, most famously the Gunpowder Plot, and a constant anxiety about Catholic conspiracies. Yet beyond political paranoia, James suffered from hoplophobia, a pathological fear of weapons, especially naked steel. Contemporaries traced this fear to a horrifying event before his birth. In 1566, while his mother, Mary, Queen of Scots, was 6 months pregnant, her private secretary, David Rizzio, was brutally murdered in her presence, stabbed 56 times by Lord Darnley and his accomplices. During the attack, a pistol was reportedly aimed at Mary's pregnant belly. According to 17th century medical theory, such maternal trauma could imprint itself on the unborn child, a belief James himself accepted. As an adult, his fear manifested visibly in his clothing. He wore heavily padded and quilted doublets designed to be stiletto-proof, transforming fashion into personal armor. These bombasted garments made him appear ungainly and corpulent, attracting ridicule at court. His terror even disrupted royal ceremonies. When knighting subjects, James often turned his head away or closed his eyes to avoid seeing the blade, nearly injuring recipients and forcing courtiers to guide his hand. The king who ruled a powerful realm was, at heart, haunted by the glint of steel. Coming in at number 7, we enter the 20th century, where absolute power collided with the fear of flight. Among modern dictators, aviophobia became a defining trait rooted in paranoia and fear of assassination. Joseph Stalin stands as a prime example. Stalin flew only once or twice in his entire life, most notably to the Tehran Conference in 1943. Even then, he refused to board a Soviet aircraft, trusting only an American Douglas C-47 provided through Lend-Lease and escorted by 27 fighter planes. For the Potsdam Conference in 1945, despite immense urgency, Stalin insisted on traveling by armored train. The journey took several days, with every kilometer of track guarded by Red Army soldiers to prevent sabotage. This obsession with control reflected his belief that an aircraft was a death trap beyond his physical command. This fear echoed decades later in North Korea. Kim Jong-il inherited both the paranoia and the preference for rail travel, likely influenced by Soviet precedent and his father Kim Il-sung. Kim Jong-il traveled exclusively by armored train for rare diplomatic visits to Russia and China. His fear of flying was so extreme that elaborate logistics were arranged, including reportedly airlifting live lobsters and French wine to train stations ahead of his arrival. For these rulers, the ground felt safer than the sky, even when it bent international diplomacy to their phobias. Landing at number 8, we examine Muammar Gaddafi and his fear of heights and open water. The Libyan leader's eccentric behavior was often dismissed as madness, but many of his actions were coping mechanisms for acrophobia and fear of flying over the sea. Gaddafi became internationally famous for pitching a Bedouin tent during state visits to cities like Paris, Rome, and New York. Publicly, he framed this habit as loyalty to his desert roots and Bedouin identity. However, diplomatic cables later revealed a more personal motive. Gaddafi could not tolerate staying on upper floors of hotels due to severe vertigo and refused to ride elevators. The tent allowed him to remain at ground level while preserving dignity through cultural symbolism. His fear extended to air travel as well. Gaddafi avoided flying over open water whenever possible, insisting on circuitous flight paths that hugged the coastlines of Africa and Europe. When traveling to the United Nations in New York, he reportedly stopped in Portugal to rest and mentally prepare for the unavoidable Atlantic crossing. In Gaddafi's case, global travel itself became an exercise in managing fear. At number 9, we confront Adolf Hitler and his intense fear of dentists. Adolf Hitler, responsible for unprecedented human destruction, displayed physical cowardice when faced with dental care. He suffered from dentophobia and avoided dentists until pain became unbearable. His personal dentist, Johannes Blaschke, kept meticulous records of Hitler's terrible oral health, including abscesses, gum disease, and chronic bad breath. According to Blaschke, Hitler had an extremely low tolerance for pain and frequently demanded procedures be stopped. A standard root canal treatment, which should have taken a single session, was stretched over 8 days because Hitler could not endure more than brief periods in the dental chair. This episode exposes a striking contradiction. The man who demanded total sacrifice from millions could not withstand routine medical discomfort. His fear did not diminish his cruelty, but it revealed a deeply fragile body beneath the image of authoritarian strength. Finally, at number 10, we separate true phobia from power-driven obsession and madness. Emperor Nero is often claimed to have feared the color purple, but this was not porphyrophobia. Tyrian purple was an extraordinarily expensive dye reserved for imperial authority, and Nero viewed its use by others as a direct challenge to his supremacy. He made it a capital offense for anyone but the emperor to wear this color, and reportedly ordered the execution of a woman who appeared in purple robes at a recital, interpreting it as treason rather than fear. In contrast, King Christian VII of Denmark, who ruled from 1766 to 1800, suffered from severe mental illness, likely schizophrenia. His fears were erratic, hallucinatory, and sometimes focused on specific colors, which he believed foretold war or persecution. These aversions were not isolated phobias, but symptoms of broader psychosis. Together, these cases remind us that not every bizarre behavior of rulers stems from fear alone, but often from ego, delusion, or profound mental instability hidden behind crowns and power. Power built empires, but fear quietly ruled the minds behind them. If these hidden phobias changed how history unfolded, imagine how many decisions were driven by terror rather than strength. Share your thoughts in the comments, like this video if it surprised you, and subscribe for more untold history and psychological deep dives. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.